I'm not saying this is the most underappreciated Batman figure ever made, but as of this recording, there is not one single dedicated review of this figure on YouTube. That's a real shame because this figure is actually really important. Stick around to find out why. Welcome to 5 Points of Articulation. The 5 points I discuss are packaging, presentation, posability, playability, and price. I'm Jason, and the Batman is finally hitting theaters. To celebrate, we're showcasing Batman figures, both old and new, all month long. Today, Batman Month continues with a throwback to the 1994 Legends of Batman Crusader Batman by Kenner. Starting off with the packaging, we can see a really colorful blister card, really cool portrait of Batman on the corner, Legends of Batman logo, and a trading card. This figure originally came from KB Toys, but unfortunately somebody scratched the price away. On the back, we can see more figures in the line, as well as a write-up on the series, and Crusader Batman in particular. Of all the classic Kenner Dark Knight related blister cards, Legends of Batman was always my favorite. For packaging, I'm giving Crusader Batman 1 whole point. Moving on to presentation, on the top of his head Batman stands at 5 inches, but to the top of his ears he stands at 5 1/4. From the top, and I absolutely love this head sculpt. The brow and temples really evoke Michael Keaton, and he's got a really great lantern jaw. Admittedly, the color scheme isn't quite what a lot of us associate with Batman. The cape and cowl are almost a dark purple, and the bodysuit, which would normally be gray, is more of a colonial blue. Additionally, the logo is less yellow and more orange. To be honest, it seems to be the same yellow that they used for Batman the Animated Series. And even the utility belt is a bit tweaked from what we normally see. All that aside though, and when you look at this figure, it is unmistakably a basic comic book style Batman costume. He's got the gloves with the scallops, the familiar triangular top boots, and the underwear on the outside. The anatomy is definitely questionable, but there's no question that this is a 90s style comic book Batman come to life. All that aside, this Batman figure is actually very significant. For one thing, this was the very first comic-style Batman figure on toy shelves in 10 years. We'll talk more about it during playability, but the last one had been Superpowers back in 1984. Every other Batman figure had been based off a movie or a cartoon. It's also significant because of its size. Up to this point, the figures that Kenner was making was decidedly smaller. This figure helped to make 5 inches the standard for the 90s. And despite efforts like Legends of the Dark Knight or DC Superheroes, it really stayed the standard until 2003's Batman by Mattel. Of course, from there, Batman's only gotten bigger and bigger, and that brings us to the other significant thing about this figure, the cape. Strictly speaking, the first all-plastic Batman figure had a rubber cape, but after that, his capes were always soft goods with a C-clip. This figure was the first Batman since 1979 to have a fully sculpted cape, which has now become the standard. It isn't the best sculpted or the most accurate Batman figure ever made, but it was one of my favorite Batman figures as a kid, and to this day remains an important step in Batman's action figure evolution. Taking the creative liberties into account, for presentation, I'm giving this Batman 1/2 point. Moving on to posability, and Batman has 6 points of articulation, kind of. First things first, and he has a swivel in the neck. He also has swivel shoulders, and T-style swivel hips. Technically, there is a cut in his waist, but that's to accommodate his action feature and not for the purpose of articulation. By today's standards, this Batman is barely articulated at all, but this was the standard in 1994. For posability, I'm giving Crusader Batman 1 whole point. Before we continue, if you like this video, do me a favor and give it a like. I love doing retro videos like this, but they unfortunately don't get the same amount of attention as the newer stuff. Your likes go a long way to help more people to see it. Moving on to playability, and Batman comes with a trading card. Almost 30 years later, and we're still getting trading cards with our Batman figures. This one is a completely unique painting, and if you want to read it, pause here. Spoiler alert, and it's the exact same as the back of the blister card. Crusader Batman also comes with this blaster thingy. Just plug it in his hand, and then you aim like so. But if all that wasn't enough, Batman comes with his very own action feature. You just wind the fist back and... oh. Probably just worn out due to age, but playability is more than just accessories, it's also about how well your figure plays with others. In addition to a pretty cool comic book style version of Batman, this line also had its own version of the Joker. They also made this Riddler and Catwoman. This figure is significant because it was the very first comic style all plastic Catwoman figure ever made. Kenner was going to release one as part of the Superpowers collection, but it never came to pass. It also featured the very first action figure ever made of Nightwing. As always, you had had your more outrageous Batman variants. This one was called Future Batman. And of course, you can't go wrong with Batman in full medieval plate armor. Here he is with the Superpowers Batman. Like I said during presentation, it had been 10 years since a comic book style Batman had been on toy store shelves. Flash forward to the present, and it feels like we don't go 10 days without a new Batman figure. In fact, we wouldn't see another plain Jane comic style Batman figure again until 1996 with this version, Batman Total Justice. Even though the colors didn't match, I actually used to use the Crusader cape on this body. They never made a standard Robin for this line, but he does scale pretty well with the Total Justice one. Kenner released a similar series of Superman figures the following year, but to me it just wasn't the same. But my favorite figure to put him with was this one. Spider-Man the animated series debuted the exact same year as Legends of Batman, and these two figures quickly became my definitive versions of the Dark Knight and the Iraq Knight. Here he is with a couple of dollar store versions of Batman. The one on his right is by Mattel, and the one on his left is by Spin Master. For some perspective on how far we've come, here he is with Rebirth Batman and Batman from the Three Jokers. Funny thing, and the purples of the cape actually match. For a relative scale comparison, here he is with Pete the Spidey and the Spectacular Spider-Man. And for the only stealth Iron Man I have smaller than Batman, well, here you go. My favorite part of the Legends of Batman line, however, was this Batmobile. Granted, you had to ditch the cape to get him in there, but it's still one of my favorite Batmobiles ever made. Legends of Batman was a nice little toy line that gave us some of the only comic-style versions of these characters in the 90s. Who knows where it would have gone had it continued, but for what it was a lot of fun. For playability, I'm giving Crusader Batman 1 whole point. This leaves us with nothing left to discuss but the price. In 1994, this figure would have set you back between $5 to $7. I got this one on eBay for only $12. If you want a 5-inch Batman for your collection, or just an important piece of Batman action figure history, this is a great addition. For price, I'm giving Crusader Batman 1 whole point for a grand total of 4.5 out of 5. If you like this video, check out one of these. Thank you so much for watching. I'll be back again real soon, but until then, play nice and have fun.